Desire is often a bad word in Christianity. So it becomes synonymous with something selfish, something entitled, God forbid, eventually sexual. But part of the way that I've begun thinking about desire is almost like that parable of the talents, where like you have been given something remarkable inside of you, and your task is to develop it. It's to increase the compounding interest of the talents and gifts and desires that you've been given. So as a psychotherapist, as a minister, it's not that I haven't seen desire wreak havoc in marriages and greed. I have. But the issue is never too much desire. The issue is always way too little formation.
Hello and welcome to the Union Podcast. My name is Bonnie Pue and this is my husband, Bryan.
Hello.
And we are so excited to be able to share this conversation we had with Jay Stringer. Honestly, I feel like it was so rich and insightful. Before we dive in though, Bri, what's been a highlight for you lately? What's been going on in your world?
I had a really great opportunity to work with the youth worker community. It's a ministry led by Sid Coop here in Canada, and just really focused on helping youth leaders, youth workers disciple the next generation and just have thriving youth ministries. And so that was a great opportunity. So excited to be a part of I was honored and excited to have been part of their few conferences that they do across the nation. So
yeah, they're doing a good work.
They are. And it's super fun too. It's an incredible event. So if you're a youth leader, next year, sign up for any of the youth worker community conferences. They're all the way in New Brunswick, or I think in Moncton. And then they're all the way here in our backyard too, in Abbotsford, BC on the West Coast. So encourage you to do that.
Yeah, it's really cool to see. I think there's a greater networking and connection of ministries happening across Canada. Canada's so widespread that sometimes that can be hard. People can feel isolated, not really connected with other ministries or people. But that's why I do appreciate that ministry that they're doing is trying to resource the church. So
yeah. What about you? What's been going on in your world?
Okay, I actually just finished last night a book about Hudson Taylor, a biography about him. For those who don't know, missionary in the mid to late 1800s to China when it was very much closed off, and he had the faith to believe that he could bring the gospel into inland China. And it's just, I actually feel like as I finished the book, and this morning I journaled some portions of quotes from his writings, I'm like, it's actually a little bit rattling just of what one person can accomplish. And yeah, this morning it's made me just be praying Lord, how could I have the faith or the tenacity or the vision like a man like Hudson Taylor? So he was just so determined, no matter the circumstances around him, that he would just say I trust in the Lord and he sees my need. So they'd be out of money, or he at one point had 25 cents in the bank and he's got missionaries to take care of. And he's like, well, the money will be here soon because God says he knows what we have need of. I'm like, I want to be a woman of faith like that, and have with the work that we're doing with the union, our goal is it for the individual, helping people find wholeness. We want to bring gospel-centered messages about sexuality, identity, and relationships. And we know that this is something every nation of the world needs. And so, I don't know, I'm just praying God, what does that actually look like? What would that actually mean? What if we could actually do that and see healing come? And what if we could dismantle sex trafficking in Nepal? Or what if we could, there's all of those things. And what if we could reverse the family traumas that have occurred, and not reverse it, go back in time, but what if we could teach on how to build strong families? And anyways,
but I think you're saying, our heart is, because we're local church people, we really do believe that the church that Jesus is building, the gates of hell will not prevail against, but also is the light of the world. That we are a city on a hill, and I think we want to see the church be the church that way. And I think one of the things, obviously, in our current cultural moment that we're seeing so much of is the sexual brokenness within leaders and the downfall of churches and ministries when the sexual brokenness is not healed in leaders, and then they get to a place of influence and really the damage that's done there. And so our heart is to see the church be a catalyst, salt and light in the culture they're supposed to be in. And so that's what we're about.
Because it's like the worst case scenarios is that these followers of Jesus are actually followers of Jesus are doing things that Jesus would never, ever lead them to. And then the other thing is the sin of apathy, where leaders are like, I don't know where to start. I'm just going to be quiet and never, ever talk about this thing that is in so many of my congregant members' lives. And we'll just pretend it's not happening. And so just to inspire change.
Totally.
That's the heart. And which is very much connected to our conversation today with Jay Stringer. As we get further in the conversation, near the end, we talk a lot about what causes leaders to fall. Why are we silent about these things when we know the patterns? So I think you will be encouraged and challenged wherever you're coming from today. So
we are also really excited. This is the final week before our Called conference coming up April 10th and 11th in Abbotsford, BC at LifeSpring Church. So if you have not gotten your tickets, if you are watching this and the 10th and 11th has not gone by, I encourage you, go to our website, theunionmovement.com, and under the Called conference, you can still register. If it's not in the future, I don't know how this works, if we're going to throw off the space-time continuum with all of this, but I encourage you. We'd love to see you there. We're all about equipping people to really carry a gospel-centered message and gospel-centered heart towards into their sphere of influence in the culture that's really just rooted in the gospel around sexuality, identity, and relationships. So we would love to see you there. We've got some great speakers. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be a great time.
Absolutely. So without any further ado, let's dive into this conversation with Jay Stringer. He is a therapist, researcher, and author who has spent the last 15 years helping individuals find healing and freedom from unwanted sexual behaviors. His first book, called Unwanted, has had over 100,000 copies sold, and now just available on March 3rd is his next book called Desire. And with a tagline, The Longings Inside Us and the New Science of How We Love, Heal, and Grow. I know that this book and the information and the insight he brings in this conversation today are going to be a big encouragement for you wherever you're at in your journey. So let's head over to a conversation with Jay.
Welcome to the Union Movement Podcast. The Union Movement exists to help people find wholeness in sexuality, identity, and relationships with a gospel-centered and holistic approach. We hope and pray that this podcast episode is enriching in your life and helps you to see the beauty of God's design for all of these areas. Please enjoy today's episode.
All right, here we are with Jay Stringer. Jay, welcome to the Union Podcast. It's an honor to have you here.
Bryan and Bonnie, so good to be with you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited for the directions we're going to take today.
Yeah, we're going to go on a little bit of a journey today. It's going to be exciting. For some of our listeners who may not be super familiar with your work, can you just tell us a little bit about your ministry life, but then also like the areas of counseling that you've been in?
Sure. So I am a licensed mental health counselor, an ordained minister, also a mental health researcher, and also an author. And so a lot of my work is kind of at the intersection of psychology, theology, did an MDiv and also a master's in counseling psychology. And part of that is like, I love the church, but the more that I'm in the church, the more I'm just like, come on, I need to be in individual stories. I need to hear honesty.
Right.
I need to kind of grapple with what are people's lives actually doing. But then the more that I do clinical practice, the more attention I, put on themes and dynamics. I'm like, what I'm learning here, what I'm seeing here really needs to go back into the way that, the church forms people and disciples people. So to me, it's I love the life that I get to live in that realm of working with churches, working with leaders to actually change conversations around mental health, sexuality, some of the difficulties that we face in our lives, but then also learning so much from my clients and just pattern recognition and research. So that's a little of my professional life. I live in New York City with my wife, who's also a psychotherapist, and we have 2 kids,
Wow.
almost 13, almost 11, and a little, 4-year-old Bernedoodle. That is a little bit of a pathetic excuse of a dog, but he is like a teddy bear, and my kids love him. I'm
Sure.
deeply ambivalent about him, but the rest of the family likes him.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. That's a very cool intersection of, like you're saying, what your vocation is. I'm thinking when you were in grade 12 and people would say, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? Did any of that cross your mind? How did you get into it?
I mean, I always think my middle school self would be completely horrified by the work that I'm doing, like talking about themes of porn and sexuality and my own struggles and eating disorders and difficulties. Like my middle school self would have been horrified. I think my grade 12 probably would have had a little bit more integration and hope and kind of being proud that I was working through this, and but still probably like, did he really just say that? Is that really his life's work?
Right.
But I think that's part of the goal of, just what we do in all areas of our life is this integration of there are parts of me, ages in me that are fully alive, that want to be passionate, honest. There's also seasons of trauma and heartache that I've been through that I never wanted to talk about those seasons, and some of the strategies that I developed to be able to maneuver my way out of them, never wanted those disclosed, but that's part of the goodness of this life is some level of integration between all of that to where I am today. And part of it today is I wouldn't say that I'm in like a midlife crisis, but like more midlife chrysalis of I'm in a goop right now. Like I have some sense of where I come from, the life that I get to do, the professional world, but I also feel like something in me needs to crack open for this next stage of life and kind of honoring the desires, the talents that God has put inside me. So I don't know if it ever changes. I feel less secrecy, obviously, than other categories of my life, but similar levels of pain and disorientation and just questions that my wife and I are asking there's so much personal stuff in the midst of the professional stuff always. So
Wow.
Yeah.
What's that like as a counselor and a mental health professional to be married to another mental health professional? Like how does like dialogue and conflict look in your marriage? I'm not trying to pry too much into that, but I find that very fascinating.
Yeah, I wish I could just bring her in right now to answer that question with me, maybe on another show. But it started out with just a lot of like madness of kind of like that notion of there's enough language that you have to be dangerous. There's certain things that you notice, and then I think it's called the oh man, I can't believe I'm forgetting it. It's something, there's some effect. It's going to come back to me later in the episode, but essentially like Kruger effect. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but it's essentially like when you first begin to learn something, your sense of like certainty goes up so high. And it starts to go up, and then all of a sudden it just plummets and you're like, I know nothing. And so I would say our marriage was a little bit like, I am so certain about this is what's happening for you. And she was really certain. But for me in particular, I just had a much more contempt-based view of her marriage, myself. And so I think just that was a lot of those early days, is just needing to confront some of the contempt that was undergirding my approach to myself, to my wife. So I think it's getting better. I think we've found allies, partners. We can, talk through some certain things, but just deeply enjoy conversations, my time with her. So it's,
of course,
my soul feels so much more settled in my marriage than it did when we first got married. So, it gives us a lot to talk about. It's like there's like whether we both saw Hamnet together, the film, and I went alone the next couple times just because it was like this sacred place of grief for me, of like processing. Here's this realm of honesty, but then she saw it, and so there's just psychological, theological categories of grief and creativity, and that's I think the fruit of a lot of those years is we have like just a lot of realms theologically, psychologically, the work of clients to talk about. So probably too long of an answer, but it's
No,
been
that's
great.
madness and it's been beauty. And as one of my friends says, like marriage it is a taste of heaven, but it's also an experience of hell, and both are true.
Yeah. Well, we just remember one preacher saying that like when you get married, you kind of step into a certain level of death, right? There's parts of you that have to die. But I think the good news of, obviously walking with the Lord is that even in our death to self, there's always a resurrection and a new life that comes to us as we just yield to him and his care and his shepherding that way. So, yeah.
And we definitely understand it's like diverse personalities, family of origin,
everything.
We're so different in so many ways. We thought we were more similar when we got married.
Yeah.
And it's like the deeper you go in, we're like, what? What are you even?
Yeah.
Anyway, so learning how different we are, but then still being passionate about similar things. And look what I just learned. Look what I just learned. And, it's fun. And like you said, it's beautiful and
that's one of the
messy
things
and
that I'm
painful.
learning so much is like a lot of times people come to me to do an intensive or therapy and they're like, my marriage is broken. And part of what ends up being uncovered are all these family of origin issues where they lack a development of a self, where they don't know who they are outside of their partner. They have no meaning, no purpose in their life. So the big challenge that I always, reflect back to them is it possible that your marriage is actually doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing, which is to reveal all of these themes that up until now you have chosen not to address? And so, I think that's the stage of life, the crucibles of marriage, the crucibles of our own development in any area are going to quickly highlight where we're underdeveloped. And you can hate the stage, you can hate the marriage, you can hate your body, but they are doing exactly what they are designed to do, which is to expose, hopefully, and with kindness to it. But life is hard.
Not wrong. You're not wrong.
There's no life hack that undoes that.
No,
right?
totally.
I think as I'm getting
and
older,
if you're
I'm
looking for it, you're looking for an escape hatch, which I understand, but it's not going to lead you to where you want to go. It just punts the issue. It delays the issue so much more.
Right. Well, I think that's a great kind of point to launch off of, because we're going to be talking about your new book, Desire, and really connected to these avenues of being, avenues of our story, and really becoming really who God's always designed us to be, always longs for us to be. But just to kind of rewind a little bit, like I was introduced to your work through your book, Unwanted, that I think is incredible. Yeah. Honestly, I feel like it was such a missing piece in the conversation around walking in sexual integrity. I think it got beyond just the kind of the behavioral modification type things and started to like encourage people to ask deeper questions around what is the deeper longing within this. But for people who may not be aware, like what was Unwanted about, and then how, like what is now your new book, Desire, kind of building upon here?
Yeah, so Unwanted really came out of some of my clinical work of just kind of, we know that people are struggling with pornography. We know that, viewing it will increase your odds of divorce significantly. We know that, 35% of porn users are now women. We know that about a third of marriages will be impacted by infidelity. So we know that this issue has almost become ubiquitous. Like the top 3 porn sites receive more monthly traffic than like Amazon X, ChatGPT, like combined, right? So there's this sense of like it is everywhere.
Mhm.
And yet, how do you want to begin to engage it? And part of my struggle, part of my great difficulty with Christendom and evangelicalism is that they don't give us any language to help us understand or form a level of discipleship around our sexuality.
Mhm.
So what ends up happening is then there is this lust management approach that gets applied, and that's get internet monitoring on your computer, try and pray this away, journal through it. Like if you really love the gospel and understood the gospel, the desire for goodness and Jesus will eventually begin to mitigate your desire for the things of the flesh. And that was kind of the approach that I took. And then when you realize like that works for a little bit, but why isn't it working? And
Mhm.
then, like, the best-selling book of all time in this space around porn, it was not helpful. Like, so many of there's some direct lines in there that it's like, if your husband, speaking to wives, if your husband is trying to leave porn behind, you essentially, this is a direct quote, need to present your body as a merciful vial of methadone to him. So that
Mm.
becomes this view of marital sex is like your husband's going to be tempted and you need to be a methadone like fix. Well, what does that do to libido in women
Yeah.
when it's like
Oh
I
yeah.
not only
Kills it.
need to it kills it,
Mhm.
right? I don't even need to just prioritize my husband because I like him, but I need to actually like present my body lest he look somewhere else. And so
Right.
things like that just were not helpful. And then on the more progressive side, it's kind of like, as long as your desires aren't hurting anyone, or if you're just pursuing ethical porn or whatever it is, there is this sense of kind of like, as long as no one's getting hurt and we don't want shame and stigma to be the issue, so let's just not really address it. So to me, wildly unhelpful paradigms. And so I started questioning, like, is there something that we could do to actually learn about why we're drawn to these things? So I wanted to ask questions like, why are we drawn to some porn searches and not others? Why are we drawn to
Mhm.
some type of affair partners? Why do some people go to affairs after porn and some will never do that? Like, what are all these,
Hmm.
questions all about? And so I designed a research study that looked at family of origin, adverse childhood experiences, and then we got deeply, deeply personal of like asking people like not just do you watch porn, but what types of porn do you actually look at?
Mm.
What do you type in? And what we found was like astonishing to me. We could begin
Mm.
to predict not just do people watch porn and how much of it do they watch, but like what types of porn, what types of affairs they were going to
Mm.
pursue
Mm.
based on the unaddressed stories of their life. And I
Mhm.
know to some listening, it's kind of like, what? Aren't we supposed to flee sexual immorality? Why are we talking about curiosity? But to me, this is all like Romans 12:2. Like, don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be
Mhm.
transformed by the renewing of your mind. And part of the dilemma that I was having in my own faith formation was that it was really clear growing up in the church of what patterns not to be conformed to. But this process of renewing my sexual mind, I don't know about you all, but my Southern Baptist high school in Virginia did not teach me at all to renew my sexual mind or to understand it.
Right.
And so that's kind of what I was trying to do with Unwanted was to offer a level of discipleship around like, how do you understand your desire? And yes, it can be sinful. It can be something that's problematic. But so much of the way that the
Mhm.
gospel interacts with those things is with questions. Like to Adam, it's not bounce your eyes from that next tempting piece of fruit. It's Adam,
Right.
where are you? Jacob, what's your
Mhm.
name? Hagar, who's just been traumatized. Where do you come from? Where are you going? So, way too long winded way of talking about unwanted. But part of what we learned is that unwanted sexual behavior is not random, it's a roadmap to healing and to growth. So,
Yeah.
that was unwanted, was okay, we understand where these problematic desires come from. But then the
Mhm.
problem that I started having and I don't know if I should pause there if you all want to talk about any of that or just go right into why
I do a
desire
little
now.
bit.
Yeah, go for
Yeah.
it.
Well, one thing is that study that you did of the connecting of family of origin traumatic experiences when you're young, I'd be so curious to look at that research. I don't know if it's published anywhere, but that sounds fascinating. And I heard you on a different interview talking about, I just want to touch that family of origin thing and the trauma we experience. I heard you talking about layers of attachment or needs that we get or we're supposed to get kind of in a not sin impacted world, what God intended for every child to have. Can you unpack that a little bit and how
Yeah.
that is connected to, like,
Okay.
maybe even
Yeah.
give an example. This need wasn't met naturally. You try to get
Love
it
it.
later.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a good question. So let's think about Dan Siegel, great neuroscientist, author. He says that kids need 4 things to thrive. They need to be seen, safe, soothed, and secure. So those are the 4 S's that we need. So seen is that experience of you had a mother, a father, a caregiver, a grandmother, an aunt, someone meaningful in your life that saw you when you were in heartache. So I always think about like middle school as a prototype of hell. Like, did you have a mother or a father that actually saw your heartache, that said, like, when you went
Right.
off to school, off to the bus, you seemed okay, but there is something about your face that has fallen. Like, that's what it means to be seen. But not just seen in heartache, it's also seen in delight. Like, did your parents know this was your favorite color? This was your favorite Lego. This was your favorite burger. This was your favorite ramen. This was your favorite movie. And did they scheme? Like, did they wake up on Saturday mornings and kind of nudge you awake to say, I've got the best day planned for you? And that's all of like what it means for parents to be something of the image of God to their kids, of like, I am a God, I am a parent who sees your lament, who sees your heartache. Your tears are precious to me, but also I'm waiting on your bed in the morning because I've given you all these desires, all of these things that we get to go and play. Like, that's a good parent. It's also the God of the universe. So we need
Right.
those experiences of being seen. And then
It's just
safety.
I'm like, that's so inspiring. That's so beautiful. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Lord, help me be a good mom. I want to do that
Right.
for my kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so scene.
And
Okay, keep
then
going.
seen, safe. I'll go through safe fast because I want to spend a little bit more time on soothing. But safe is, sexually safe, understanding your body, technologically safe in these days. Former generations older than us had to work really hard to find porn. We have to
Right.
work really hard to avoid it. There's a big difference there. So,
Yeah.
this digital childhood, this phone-based childhood that we've been given has been dangerous for a lot of people. So it's not so much that the threat is outside, the threat is actually inside. Emotional safety. And then the third category is that of soothing. And so this is really important when it comes to problematic behaviors, but you want your parent to be a source of regulation for you. That when you are angry, when you are anxious, when you are entitled, you want to see that your parent is strong enough to survive that. So there's British psychoanalyst by the name of Winnicott. And what he would say is, good parenting is like what we see Jesus doing on the cross. High standards aside, it's that sense that humanity got to give all their anger, all their scapegoating, all of their entitlement, and see that Jesus was vulnerable enough to be impacted by it, but also strong enough to survive it. That even the strongest death, anger, vitriol, adultery, murder that all of us have, Jesus is bigger than that. And that's what allows us to develop security and a sense of soothing. But let's kind of flip that for a moment, most of us have a lot of experiences where we were unseen in childhood, that we didn't have soothing in a relationship, but we found soothing in a screen, in a donut, in pornography, in some level of substance. And so what ends up happening is if you are not seen and safe and soothed, you have to find that somewhere. And so for a lot of us, porn use became some of those experiences of feeling like I saw someone in porn where I wasn't necessarily drawn to the bodies, but I was drawn towards the eyes initially, or this, 100% increase in dopamine, and you begin to feel pleasure and oxytocin. Oxytocin is released when you have an orgasm. It's a sense of bonding to whatever is nearby. It could be your spouse. It could also be your phone. You're going to develop an oxytocin-like bond with whatever you orgasm next to. So then that becomes the soothing that people experience. And then later in life, they have this dual life where they have their public life and they're wanting to live in one way, but then they have all these secrets and all these patterns of soothing and attachments. And inevitably, that's what I think is part of the point of crises and crucibles that we go through, is they expose not just our sin, but how we learned how to survive. So porn, I'm always trying to invite people to understand, like, when did it form? What's your relationship to it? What's the meaning of the sexual fantasy that you're seeking out? And what clues is that really trying to develop? So our family of origin is where we learn desire. It's where we learn hiding. It's where we learn, are our needs going to be seen? Are we going to be soothed? Do we need to find an external source of soothing? So that's the invitation, is not just to outgrow porn, but to really understand your story and where you come from, so that you can join with God in co-authoring a new future, instead of one that's just two-step dancing between, like, I want to be good, I'm also deeply ashamed. I want to be better tomorrow, but I keep struggling. It's like that toll of the whiplash of back and forth
Right.
has ruined so many lives and marriages.
Of course. Yeah. So where do you see, like, or what part does your new book Desire kind of build upon with that foundation that you really laid within Unwanted?
Yeah. So desire is often a bad word in Christianity. So it becomes synonymous with something selfish, something entitled, God forbid, eventually sexual. But part of the way that I've begun thinking about desire is almost like that parable of the talents, where, like, you have been given something remarkable inside of you, and your task is to develop it. It's to increase the compounding interest of the talents and gifts and desires that you've been given. So as a psychotherapist, as a minister, it's not that I haven't seen desire wreak havoc in marriages and greed. I have. But the issue is never too much desire. The issue is always way too little formation. And that's a really big distinction, that you can never have too much desire for God. God is the author and the designer of all desire. So that sense of God desired creation, desired diversity within creation, desires to incarnate God's self into humanity to show and display love. Like, all of that is a product of desire. The union movement is a product of desire. Like, all of the best things in your life are a result of desire, but also probably all the worst things in your life are also because of your desire. Like, I have had a desire to have kids. I've also had a desire to get rid of my kids from time to time. So it's this interplay of, like, desire is something that we live in a civil war with. And so after Unwanted, it became that question of, like, what do people actually need? And having insight into why you're drawn to porn doesn't solve intimacy in your marriage. It doesn't solve the trauma history. It doesn't help you develop a sense of self. And so it's not that Unwanted was unimportant. It was just incomplete. And so part of what I was trying to do with Desire is to say, we need something of a roadmap of how to be human, of how to do intimacy well, how to understand sex, how to understand meaning. And just paying attention to more research, paying attention to what did I need as a human being, what did my clients need, really led me to, this isn't just about outgrowing and developing insight about a single paradigm. This is about the engine of desire itself and how much it's just been bastardized in the church, of just like, we don't honor the talents that God has given to us. We don't know what to do with these things. And if you've been a parent, you know that all desires start out raw. Like they're going to be
Mhm.
underdeveloped. Like misspelling is how we learn how to spell. Stumbling is how we learn how to walk. So like, of course, desire is going to come out entitled. Of course, it's going to come out. But the task of the family, the task of the
Mm.
church is to be a formation process for our desires, not someone that teaches us to suppress and to bury them. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
little bit of the background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As someone who I grew up in the church, and I don't think I would have had language for it at all, but I was always torn between the Jeremiah that says, like, kind of beware of the heart, it's deceitfully wicked, who can know it? And then Psalms where it says, delight yourself in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart. And I mean, we see that tension. You just talked about the tension. Sometimes my desires are fantastic, sometimes they're not. We see that in Romans. Sometimes I do the things I don't even really want.
Mhm.
And so I love what you're doing here of kind of saying, yeah, there is a tension. And that's, I mean, I believe that's what Jesus did is he came to, it says in Ezekiel, to take our heart, our stony heart, and make it responsive to his spirit so that we start to desire, he'd write his law on our heart, that we'd start to want the things that he wants, and we're able to recognize the desires that are ultimately going to lead to death. And so I just think this work is significant. And I think I just think it's really going to help a lot of
Totally.
people.
Yeah, what the research showed on that note is if you wanted a recipe for destructive desire, the ingredients would be don't teach your kids how to want. Fill up their life with early trauma, deprioritize seeing them and making them feel secure, and then watch what happens with those ingredients. It turns into unwanted behaviors. It turns into marital difficulties. It turns into narcissistic tendencies. But if you want a recipe to actually develop integrated children, it's honor their desire. So when they are children, when they have a caregiver that sees their desires, helps them, celebrates them, also helps discipline and form them, they
Right.
grow up into adults that are like really healthy. They actually desire really good things with their career. They have high marital satisfaction. They have the highest levels of sexual satisfaction. All of it is because their desires were honored. They weren't intruded upon. They weren't treated as selfish. So part of what we need to have a check on is like the ways that we disciple desire have huge implications to the problems that we're going to encounter later on in life.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm just suddenly I'm thinking about a biography I read about St. Francis of Assisi and the beautiful work that he did to help the poor. But as I read it, I was also really conflicted because I think like he would have had the belief that every desire he had to be crucified. So he like lived with no shoes, and he purposely would punish himself and choose weakness. And it was weird. I was like, okay, so he's doing a lot of good.
Yeah.
But he's also, I feel like he's missing something of the heart of God for him as a son, And so I think that this conversation in Christendom to recognize as a good father, as a good mother, we would desire to give good gifts to our children. How much more would our Heavenly Father desire that for us? And if someone is dealing with unwanted sexual behavior, for them to know that God is a kind father who doesn't hate them and doesn't hate their, doesn't hate their sexual desires even. Of course, they need, like you said, they need to be formed. There's some sexual desires that is like, no, that's only harmful. That's or that is maybe, and can you maybe speak to this? What do we do is talking about desires, is it make it almost like an excusing of the sinful of things that we would say that's sinful behavior because it's harmful. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, let me I'll go back a little bit to what you said about like so many of the church fathers didn't understand their desires well. Like Augustine was probably a sex addict, like, not just into internet porn, but orgies and affairs. Jerome, who translated, the Hebrew Bible into Latin, like he used to like have, hook up sex essentially in Rome, then go into the sepulchres to have the fear of hell scared out of him when he was studying in The desert, when he would be struggling with lust and he hated that desire, he would throw himself into thorn bushes or like try and study Hebrew in the midst of it. So you see these kind of warring desires inside of a lot of the church fathers of like, I got to get rid of this thing. And it's not a kind approach. It's not a discipleship approach. It's just a sense of I need to get rid of. So I think that's built into our inheritance that we have received within the church is, yeah, like on one hand, these desires are beautiful, but also we need to like throw ourselves into thorn bushes and just extract this thing rather than actually learn how to be formed. So I think that is totally the case with regard to kind of just the inheritance that we come from. And I forgot part two of your question.
Well, I think what we were going to kind of move into was like, and this was a thought I was having too, like some of our listeners might hear the avenue of like exploring your desires, curiosity, and is like, well, is he saying that like we should be tolerant or like indifferent towards an avenue of sin? Like, you know, like I think about how John Owen saying like, you know, kill your sin or sin's going to be killing you.
Mortify.
You know what I mean? And like, yeah, exactly. And like Romans 8, you know, Paul's just really clear that like, if you live by the flesh, you'll die. But if you put to death the deeds of the flesh, you'll live. And again, that's by the Spirit. But so how do we hold these two realities in tension? As I think they're meant to complement each other.
Okay. Yeah. So like one of the things that I'm trying to do in, you know, Desire and an Unwanted is to invite people to a healthy interrogation for their desire, not to suppress it, not to fear it, but also not blindly follow it. So there's this notion of like, you know, desire is like a chip in your computer. It's the small thing that actually contains a lot of information. So our task is to renew our mind. It's to be able to kind of go into why do I desire the things that I desire? If I'm supposed to seek first the kingdom of God, why do I some days want that and don't want that? So I have to get a sense of what are the affections of my heart. And some of them are unto the gospel. Some of them are unto my own glory. Some of them are to my own fame or security or whatever that might be. So I need to interrogate. I need to bring this under the purview of the gospel to be able to say, why do I desire this? So there's so many Psalms of like, you know, search me, know me. Like, you know, my innermost thoughts. Like God knows your porn preferences. He knows the fantasies that bring you to orgasm. God knows the greed inside of you, the desire for security, where you don't look to the heavens for rescue, but you look to your career, you look to your partner. God knows all that. But by the end of that psalm, it's how precious are his thoughts about you. So the God of the universe knows all of our motivations, all of the things inside of us. And he still loves us. That's part of our task, is to understand ourselves. So one of the things that I looked at right before I wrote Desire was there was this research study that gave participants the different word pairings. And so one group of people was given the word ocean, moon. And then the researchers distracted them for the next 10 or 15 minutes and then came back to a question and said, what is your favorite detergent? And then they just waited. And the amount of people that answered Tide detergent was like statistically way more significant than if they had been given a different word pairing. So that was just 10 minutes prior. They had been primed, discipled into ocean and moon, and then desired Tide detergent. So now when you think about what's happening in the world of pornography, like the amount of choking that's happening in sex, the amount of like just degradation that's occurring, a lot of that has been because the porn industry is priming desires inside of us. But it's not just porn. It's also, there are billion-dollar industries that are grooming your desires, priming you to want their products so that you open up your wallet. So I am under no impression that you should just follow your desires and be, let them lead to where your heart wants to go. But I also don't think that you need to pathologize desire and squash it. As I've kind of hinted at earlier, I think desire is one of the most beautiful things that could ever take place. It's unformed desire that's the problem in people's lives. So I think we need a healthy interrogation of, why do I desire this? And part of what we found in the research is, the porn preference that you have, the amount of confidence you have or don't have, the amount of desire and purpose you have, we can begin to predict all of that. And so those are really meant to help us form much healthier desires going forward. But I think we've lost that curiosity. We've lost that sense of like, I know I'm supposed to seek first the kingdom of God, but Bryan's going to seek it out differently than Jay is. Bonnie's going to seek it out very differently. And that's all very good. But if we don't know who we are and the desires inside of us and our own identity, we're not going to truly be able to seek first the kingdom of God, because we don't know who we are and we don't know where we're going.
Wow. That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good.
I have a question that's off script a little bit, or like might
Let's
take
go.
us somewhere. But just as you're saying that you can trace a little bit what people's searches are going to be, or what type of porn they're going to prefer. We're seeing, I mean, even in the news right now, the files coming out about Epstein and the child pornography, and just so much grievous sexual sin. Do you have a sense of what leads to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's
maybe multiple things.
Multiple things. So whenever I'm looking at unwanted sexual behavior, I always think about like the Mississippi River. And so, the Mississippi River in the US is, immensely long river, but it's not just one river. There's like 200 something tributaries that flow into that. And so the headwaters of that are the Missouri River. And so whenever we're looking at why do these things happen, we have to look at what are the various tributaries that flow into that. And as a psychotherapist, I'm always predisposed to like wanting to know, what is someone's childhood? What are those early experiences that shape their attachment, that kind of allowed them to bond and attach with things that are evil? So it could be a family of origin issue. It could be, male culture, entitlement. Certainly so much that happens with men in the Bible, men in culture, that the more power, the more, entitlement that they begin to have, the more that they use other human beings. So in the same way that, you might be using other people for your own financial gain that you might see in Epstein and others, you're also going to see using other people for sexual gain as well. So family of origin, it's entitlement, it's power. But then there's also powers and principalities that are out to destroy something of the glory and goodness and innocence of God. Right. Evil knows that it can't come after God, but it can come after children. It can come after men and women, and to really divide them from themselves and get them to do very wicked, despicable things. So I'm always, I don't think that you can just kind of say this is the core issue. It's just money. It's just power. It's just wealth. It's just family of origin. It's just evil. I think if you've ever been at the confluence of multiple rivers, you know that that's like an unstoppable force at that point. So whenever we're seeing something really dark in culture, it's highlighting something that is true. Epstein is showing a symptom of something that's happening in our world.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think even off of that point, I think one of the questions we had here, and I know it's going to kind of be impossible to really get in the mind of King David, but let's just hypothetically say King David reaches out to you after sin with Bathsheba. It's like, Jay, I got to sit down. How would you kind of look at his story in the light of Desire, in the light of Unwanted, and kind of everything we've discussed here? What would that conversation look like?
It's a fascinating case study to look at. Have to think about this one. I mean, a couple categories come to mind. Like the first is that sometimes when we think about the sin of David, sometimes in some Bibles, it's even called like adultery. And part of what I would push back on even in that is this isn't adultery. This is much more the abuse of power. This is much closer to a rape than it would be an affair, right? So he is a king. Women in that culture, you could get divorced for like burning the toast is kind of what some of the
Yeah.
text would be. So this woman doesn't have a lot of rights. She doesn't have choice. So she can't deny. So this is fundamentally much more of an abuse of power. Like David is using all of the giftings inside of him, his ability to see vulnerability, his ability to see battlefields, to develop strategy, to know what to do. He is using all the best desires in him, all the best gifts in him to leverage entitlement and using another human being for his own gain and killing someone else for his own gain. So that's, part of where I would start is we need to be clear that this isn't just like, oh, you had an affair. This is like, no, you raped, you abused your power. And now we need to kind of get a sense of where does that come from. But the story perspective, I don't know. That's fascinating. I would go to like, I don't know what was happening in his life at that particular time, but like when he had a Goliath, when he wasn't yet king, he was in all of these crucibles of formation. He was in places of trust and faith and also needing to develop himself. And so I think that's, a huge part of desire for a lot of us is when we have a Goliath, when we have a crucible, when we have something that we're confronting in ourselves, we become the best version of ourselves. But when we over-index in our power, we over-index in like, this is how things need to be, we become the worst version of ourselves. So I don't know what crucibles in his life were not happening there. Certainly friendships and power, but really look at that formation process of, he had a lot of trauma, a lot of difficulty on his rise to being the king. And when I work with a lot of ministry leaders, they will often sabotage their careers. So worked with many ministers who the tension of ministry, the difficulty of being a CEO, of running a company, it's too much. And so instead of honorably getting out, they create debris to blow up their life, to blow up their ministry, and it becomes something of a permission slip out of ministry. So not saying that it was sabotage of King, but lots of pressure. And so something needed to crack him open in order to address who he was, where he's going in life. So I experienced that a lot with people.
Wow.
I find that really interesting because we've talked about this before, and I wanted to get your take on it. But I think, some deeper avenues of David's life, like not publicly being blessed by his dad, like how much does that kind of play into it? Jesse doesn't honor him and bringing him before Samuel when, Samuel's looking to anoint the king and he's got to go find him. He's not with everybody. He's kind of on the outside. And I've often thought, like, I wonder how much that plays into it. Like when you've been working with leaders, like how many leaders are feeling isolated, feeling like this sense of identity and blessing is not really being affirmed in their life? Like, do you see that as a consistent trend?
All the time. Yeah. So, a couple things there would be in desire. I talk about this really important notion of a provisional self. And a provisional self is not your real self, it's a temporary self. Think about like your persona being from, the Greek word for stage mask, essentially. So all of us as a product of our childhoods have developed a stage mask. We've developed a persona to get us through life. And usually we try and condemn that stage mask of I'm such a hypocrite. But I want to for a moment just honor that the stage mask that anybody develops is remarkable. There's so much time, so much energy, so many resources that are developed in that. So I am a middle child. And I grew up, my dad was a pastor, middle children here. Both of you or?
No, I'm definitely the youngest of the family.
Definitely the youngest. Okay.
Yeah.
So my older sister was, the classic rebel of a pastor's child. Like she, was drinking, doing things, saying things that like no pastor's daughter should do, right? And so she created havoc in my family of origin. My older brother went much more the route of kind of more of a philosophical rebellion, like was reading Nietzsche at 16, challenging my dad's sermons. And there would be
Perfect.
these moments where both my brother and my sister would say things about my family and about my parents that were like the biggest zingers of all time. And I'm like, did you really say that? You can't say that. You can't, but you're
Oh,
right. And so this like growing up tension of like my older siblings were the prophets, like saying things that needed to be said about our family, also destroying some of their lives in the process. But then I grew a provisional self, which was I know that my family life could work better. Like when I have a sixth sense for my mom's needs and I read her face better than my dad, better than her husband, I know that she's happier. I know that when my dad, who has had all this difficulty and enmity with his children, when I read C.S. Lewis or when I read John Calvin or when I read John Piper, we have so much to talk about and I can offer soothing in his life.
wow.
So I developed a provisional self that was primed to be a minister, to be a therapist. I've been something of a therapist since I was 7, 8 years old, just reading
Mm,
lines, but also the ministry. Like I was formed through the world of books and ideas, but I was so disconnected from my own heart in the process. I didn't know how to do intimacy. I could lead people, I could inspire people, but friendship wise. And so all
mm,
that to say, a lot of pastors, not all, but I would say the vast majority that I work with and that I know have something of a provisional self, that they have learned
Mm,
how to be good. They've learned how to be useful. They've learned how to provide value, but they
mm,
don't necessarily know who they are outside of that. They don't
mm,
necessarily know how to be known. And so there is this wildness inside of them that they don't know what to do with, but it's the provisional self. But I think that's where some ministry leaders get into greed, get into embezzlement, get into, tepidness in a marriage or burnout. And the crises of our life are the attempt to crack open the provisional self. And that's what
mm,
crucibles do. That's what crisis and trauma and burnout does, is like it forces a reckoning. And so I don't
mm,
think that the soul is above catastrophe to kind of shake you open, so that either you can continue being a minister that's not just about saving your face, about image management, about growing, about being there for good people. But like the kingdom of God is wild. Like, so when I think about prophets, priests, and kings, a lot of us are priests and we try and be good. We remember people's stories, but there are so many prophets that have never been cultivated in a lot of good preachers and ministry leaders because they're used to being kind and nice, but they don't know how to disrupt. Because the moment that you
right.
start telling the truth in the church, they will throw you out and they will say, "You
Mm,
heretic, why are you saying that? You're
you're
really aligning
divisive.
with that person. Like you're not, yeah, you're
Yeah.
divisive. You're not doing the script." And so they're saying, we invite priests and we invite good kings and queens, but the moment that you show up as a prophet, like we will stone you. And that
wow.
scares people into, let's be good, let's be nice, let's build things, let's be kind to people. But like the wild protest that needs to come out if we're to be like Jesus, again, Jesus is the perfect prophet, priest, and king,
Hmm.
did all of them so well. But ministry is often this cornering you into being a good middle child of
Hmm.
honor God, honor, your other
Yeah.
siblings that are at odds with
Yeah.
God, but be the peacemaker between them.
Right.
Wow. Wow.
That's really good. If someone was listening to this and they're recognizing like, yeah, I I've just been living in a provisional self, maybe a leader, anybody, what is one step that you could recommend that they to start to understand themselves better and to be able to offer that to the people in their
Yeah.
world? What would be one step?
Yeah. So, think about what is like an albatross in your life. Like, what's that thing flying over that's huge, that's causing a lot of misery? And get really curious about it. So, it could be your body, could be your marriage, could be a sense of money or insecurity, could be some level of shame. But that albatross that's flying over your life is trying to get your attention. So you have to listen to what it's trying to say. It's trying to wake you up. But I also think about, I'll give something practical in a little bit, but have to set up the framing first. So
There you go.
Annie Dillard, Pulitzer Prize winning author, kind of says that I never knew I was a bell until the moment I was lifted up and struck. And so what she's referring there is like, what are the bell-like moments that you have had throughout your life where you're like, I wasn't necessarily useful to anyone. I just had the glory of being fully alive. And when did I feel like I just love being in my marriage? I love this ministry thing that I got to do. I love this sense of childhood and sparklers or ice cream sandwiches on a hot day, or like my grandmother's fireplace. And so just that sense of like, honor the albatross, the thing that's causing you misery, but then also float back to a time in life where like something of your desire was good and beautiful and true. And you have to honor both of those, that there are bells ringing inside of you that are calling for your life. So if you are in a marriage that's become tepid, maybe it's become too cozy, where the two of you are so enmeshed and doing family life and doing young children and doing all these things together, but you have no third place outside of marriage to develop yourself. And when you think about some of the early days in your marriage, part of the bond was, we're different people. We're doing all these different things. And what did you do tonight? What did I do tonight? And it was the difference that actually allowed oxygen to come together. So that could be a clarion call, is to go back to, difference. But it could also be to get back in touch with something that you love. Like, so many of my childhood memories were around like a barbecue or food, and like loving food, but also loving water and adventure. So one of the deep griefs of my life is that we were like a Costco family. Like, we had so much food. We had our fridge, then we had our fridge out in the garage, then we had a mini fridge, and then we had a deep freezer down in our basement. Like, we had pantries stuffed. And so part of the way that I was soothed as a kid was unlimited access to food. And then, as I hinted with earlier, my dad was a pastor. He was a ministry leader. So books everywhere, books and food, books and food, books and food. Guess what some of the greatest struggles and difficulties and joys of my life have been? Books and food. I write books. I read a lot of books. I eat food. I love food. I hate food. And so that sense of what did I need as a boy was way more adventure, way more play. So the albatross of a book launch, the albatross of more books, more food, the civil war of my own body, they're trying to say what did I need was not more food. It wasn't more books. I needed play. So I have to go back to some of those places, like when I felt alive as a kid, and lead that kid now as a 40-year-old man into, you don't just have to be confined to this miserable world of books and food, even though they're also glorious worlds. There's adventure for you. There's play.
Right.
So I know I'm not good at practical, but practical would be like, pay attention to the life force, pay attention to themes of joy, but then also recognize that the misery in your life is trying to shake you up. It's trying to get your attention.
That's really good.
Yeah.
I've always I've been determined, well, and this is even a little bit of my own story of pain, was I saw a youth pastor in hidden sexual sin, and it devastated our youth group. A place of power, committed adultery with my 15-year-old best friend. And I always saw like this grief of like, you were hiding. And I remember him preaching a sermon about like, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. And then later, oh gosh, I could cry. And then later, like, so now whenever I hear that verse, I go, you could preach that message and not live it.
Yeah.
So then throughout my adult years, I've wanted, when I'm struggling, when I'm feeling, when I'm desiring, when I'm even frustrated with my own sin nature, is to be like, I don't want to be alone in that. Like, I don't want to hide. So so first it's like the communion with God to say, search my heart and know me, see if there be anything in me, but then to not just stay there. But it's tough as a grown-up who's supposed to know what they're doing to then go to a friend who also pretends that they know what they're doing and then just say, I'm really dealing with this sin, with this fear, with this struggle, with this, it's vulnerable. But it's cool because it does almost crack them open a little bit to go,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like we're going to be honest. We're going to be real about this stuff.
Mhm.
So anyone listening who's like, I love that, the albatross and the desires, the good, the delight, like know it for yourself, but then find somebody and just maybe make it awkward, but talk about it,
Yeah, when you need community the most, you're going to desire it the least. So shame will
Wow.
often convince you that like you should not talk about this thing. That if people really knew about it, whether it's vulnerable or not, that they would judge you. So we end up running from the voice of shame. Like, shame is making so many accusations, and it's eager to present all the evidence in the court of law against you. And so
Right.
that sense of what does it mean to turn towards your shame and to share it is always so vulnerable. It's always such a difficult invitation. And that's part of, hearing that story from the youth pastor again, like just want to scream and weep alongside of you, where it's like, we have known this for too long. So there are two different issues that need to be parceled out there. One is, again, back to the abuse of power, that whenever we frame these things as just sexual sin or infidelity, and we don't label, teens as a sense of like, this is rape, like this is like a radical abuse of power, that if I as a therapist used my power, my license, my degrees to be able to do this with a client, I would be removed from being a therapist. Why is that not true in the church? And so we have known this for so long, and most pastors have had maybe one class in human sexuality in the entire course of their training. Imagine seeing a cardiologist who's only had one class in the human heart. You would never go and see them. And so we're giving pastors and youth pastors these really important topics, and we're also giving them power and secrecy. And it's a petri dish for harm and rape and difficulties to emerge. And we need to wake up to be able to say, this is, again, a discipleship issue. We need to form people. But then the tender side of me is like, we need to give sex ed. Like between the ages of 13 and 15 years of age, the male will have 20x increase in testosterone. Like you're going from like a Strider bike, balance bike to a motorcycle. And if the only language you have is like, pray against temptation, pray against these evil desires inside of me, but you don't understand puberty and you don't understand what's happening in your body. So to me, this is the abdication that the church has known these things for centuries and has done nothing. That's the anger inside of me towards, and the prophetic side to the church is like, we've known this since David. We've known this before David. We've known that people misuse power all the time. Why are we not creating laboratories in our seminaries and in our ministry context to help people understand their sexual story? It is maddening to me. So I'm deeply hopeful of like discipling teens and college students, and I'm deeply kind to anyone who is in a crisis. But from the systemic standpoint, my goodness, I want to rage and weep that you have experiences like that, because they are preventable. It's like, yes, the heart will do what it wants to do. But again, back to the formation issue, we're not forming people's desires. We're teaching them to suppress it. And then we're surprised when they come out in wonky, abusive ways. And I'm like, it's such a setup. I can predict it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so true. We've often just talked about like charisma, not trumping over character, you know what I mean? And not,
exactly.
Obviously nobody's perfect and nobody is, but like we cannot allow a gift to promote somebody beyond the deep content of who they are, the deep, real part of who they are. But unfortunately, like in a lot of kind of like outcome based Christianity within church, it's like, well, they're really talented, they lead worship well, or they preach really well, or, all these different things. And that becomes a qualifier versus really how is their heart and what is the depth of their character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think upstream from all of that is like, we thinking about this category of elders, and that we really need people that are older than us, the elders, the men and women in our society, to initiate us into what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, what it means to enter into marriage, so that when I begin to experience the worst versions of myself, or I begin to kind of feel like this is heaven, but also hell, like I have guides, I have people that are initiating me in and giving me language to understand my unwanted behaviors and the difficulties in my life, but also celebrating who I am and my desires and helping form me. So I don't think any of us can really underestimate the difficulty of being unformed by our elders, like just those difficulties that we face in marriage as moms, as dads, of like, am I doing this right? Like what's going, like we need a good grandma, we need a good grandfather to be like, hey, I've been there, here's some guidance, I see you.
Yeah.
But we don't have elders for the most part around us that have been formed into emotionally, spiritually healthy individuals. And that's what I love about Pete Scazzero's work, and just that notion that you can't be any more spiritually healthy than you are emotionally healthy. And so sometimes we say that they're like this bastion of spiritual vitality and health, but you can just smell it on their Instagram account that they're not emotionally healthy. And then we're surprised that they fall into greed or embezzlement or unwanted behaviors. So
wow. Jay, this has been an incredible conversation. So appreciate your work and your willingness to step into this realm and ask the hard questions and do the research. This is just really, really, really important. I'm so grateful for it, man.
And be the prophetic voice that says, like you said, the systemic change that needs to happen. The individual, all the compassion in the world, and then to shake the system a little and say, can we just bring your attention here to something here again?
that we've known for a very long time. Yes.
Yeah. It's all through.
Yeah.
It's
Honor
through the
to
Old Testament,
be
New
in
Testament.
this. Yeah. Honor to be in this conversation with you all. And thanks for what you're doing to change the conversation and give language to help people understand all these aspects that you all cover.
Totally. How can people get their copy of Desire and really just stay up to speed with your work and what you're doing?
Yeah, so a couple things would be, jay-stringer.com. I always make the joke that Jay Stringer is also a British crime fiction novelist. He beat me to all the socials and handles and websites. So I have like these lame dashes and underscores to everything. So you can go to that website. There's going to be information about quizzes, assessments, where you can order books. You can find out about intensives that I do with individuals, couples. All of that would be there. But I think, beyond that, part of like what I would love is like, whether it's a book club, whether it's whatever it is, like to buy the book, of course, but also like get a couple copies for friends or have them get it and really begin to go through a process of learning about one another's desires. Like, again, desires of your spouse, desires of your best friends, and helping watch and curate who they become, I think is one of the most greatest gifts of just to have a front row seat to someone becoming who they are, to confront the worst in themselves, to grow, to understand their story, to get a sense of like, what is the God of the universe put inside of their heart. And so to me, like, that's what this is about. It's like not about moving copies. It's about like excavating a sense of like, what is the wild terrain inside of your friends, your family?
Yeah.
And it's a journey that is hard. It's difficult, but it's also how you enter into like the wild. It's how you enter into surprise. It's how you understand something of the talents that God has put inside of you.
So good.
I love that.
So good. Love that, man. Jay, thank you again for making time. We're so grateful for this conversation. So grateful for the work you do.
Likewise.